Hello. My name is Paul Williams. I am the founder and president of Project HEURISTIC, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. I want to talk with you today a little bit about Project HEURISTIC, but mostly about why and how I came to create it. Because I believe that knowing and understanding that part of the backstory of Project HEURISTIC will help more people also know and understand how important it is and could be as a tool to reduce criminal recidivism, reduce the cycle of crime, and ultimately increase safety and security in our communities. This is going to be quite a long presentation, so I thank you in advance for your generous time and attention. Now for starters, the word heuristic, spelled H-E-U-R-I-S-T-I-C, originates from the Greek language and loosely translated into English means to find. It is often used in the context of referring to methods of problem solving, such as trial and error. And Project HEURISTIC is precisely just that, a method for problem solving. For today's purposes, it is used in the context of methods to address and resolve the problem of criminal recidivism primarily, and crime generally. The word heuristic is also used for today's purposes as an acronym, helping ex-offenders by uniting resources and information for successful transitions into communities. Heuristic. Against that backdrop, I submit to you that Project HEURISTIC endeavors primarily to reduce criminal recidivism by uniting resources and information that is pertinent to the various needs of currently and formerly incarcerated and court-involved men and women, who are, notwithstanding what many think and say dismissively about them, interested in living law-abiding and productive lives. This also includes providing resources and information to the families and loved ones of those men and women, as well as information to other members of the community and professionals, so as to enable interested and concerned persons to be better informed and equipped to appropriately address and resolve the problems of criminal recidivism and crime in general. And it is very important to note that all of this is not only for the benefit of men and women who have committed crime or may commit crime. I say it is very important because I am all too familiar with what I'll kindly refer to as intellectually challenged comments and arguments that constantly come up in and around my community about coddling criminals, being soft on criminals, what we really should do to criminals, and other similar sorts of things that demonstrate the ever-present limit on knowledge and understanding of, or interest in, the cause of much of the crime and recidivism that plagues our communities. The ridiculousness of those comments and arguments, particularly as they completely defy informed logic, always remind me of how it is all too often tempting and easy to talk tough about and exact tough responses to crime and recidivism. The absolute fact is that history and data has more than abundantly revealed that since the so-called tough on crime and war on drugs, politically flamed rhetoric and policies began about 50 years ago, we have not been able to arrest and incarcerate our way out of crime and recidivism. And also the financial and human cost of it to taxpayers, victims, offenders, families, and communities has exponentially grown to incredible levels, with little to no benefit to anyone. Think about that. I'll say it again. Little to no benefit to anyone. The simply tough on crime and war on drugs reaction has not restored anyone or anything to the pre-crime condition, and has not itself produced any measurable reduction in the rate of crime or recidivism. I'll say that again too. Has not itself produced any measurable reduction in the rate of crime or recidivism. It's been practically meaningless, and in so many ways extremely expensive, even far beyond simply financial considerations. So with that in mind, a component of Project HEURISTIC also seeks to provide meaningful information to the general public as well. This is so that we are all better informed and equipped as we view issues, consider realistic and effective responses, and voice ourselves to our families, friends, neighbors, and public officials. The benefit of this is the increase in the potential for us all to get on and stay on the same page. If nobody else, innocent people and our communities benefit from assisting currently and formerly incarcerated and court-involved men and women. Project HEURISTIC strives to prevent crime and recidivism, instead of simply continuing to leave it to law enforcement and our criminal justice system to only respond to after the fact. Now, when I say I am the founder and president of Project HEURISTIC, and I describe generally what Project HEURISTIC is, I want to be very, very clear about something. I know that it all sounds really good, and at least on the surface looks really good, and may even be considered admirable. But even I will say that the reality is there is truly much more to be desired of the adequacy, effectiveness, and meaningfulness of my work in this effort. You see, Project HEURISTIC, incorporated in May of 2012, was something that I first had a concept of many years earlier, about 11 years earlier, 2001. And I had gotten the idea for the acronym from a teacher back then. It was never something that I believed I was at all really equipped to establish and build on my own. But I knew and understood back in 2001 just how invaluable some information, some resources could have been and could be to assist currently and formerly incarcerated and court-involved men and women, to reduce the likelihood of recidivism, and how nothing of the sort existed in my home area of Ocean County, New Jersey. I first publicly spoke about the need for prisoner reentry assistance 18 years ago, in December of 2002, at a forum on poverty before the Ocean County Board of Freeholders. I begged that something be done. I asked not that extra money be doled out, but from whatever money may be allocated to deal with the issue of poverty in Ocean County, that some of that money be specifically earmarked to assist the currently incarcerated men and women who are returning to our communities. My appearance and some of my comments was memorialized in a December 4th, 2002 article in the Asbury Park Press. Over the next 10 years, no public or private agency in Ocean County had taken up any notable effort to address the need for assistance to these men and women. Instead, an exorbitant amount of taxpayer money was continued to be used to simply respond to, instead of prevent, recidivism, and regardless of the fact that a fraction of that taxpayer money could have been used more efficiently to prevent recidivism and the further ever-increasing exorbitant expenditure of taxpayer funds on after-the-fact responses by law enforcement, prosecutors, the judiciary, the jails, and the prisons. And this is to say nothing of preventing the untold numbers of additional victims of crime. So, having some idea of how to incorporate a business, and perhaps suffering with some delusional expectation that a thing like Project HEURISTIC would become of interest and supported by public officials and heads of private entities, I formally incorporated Project HEURISTIC in May of 2012. Delusional or not, my expectation proved to be wrong. In fact, no public official or head of any private entity ever expressed an interest in what I was trying to do or in doing it on their own. I have since realized, from considering the explosive growth of the drug treatment industry since 2010, that the main reason for the lack of interest was simply because prisoner reentry services was not lucrative. And regardless of the fact that preventing recidivism and crime is much more cost efficient. Unlike the drug treatment industry, there is no money to be made in prisoner reentry services. Drug treatment, on the other hand, had become big business, estimated to be a $42 billion industry. And this is a result of the 2010 enactment of the Affordable Care Act, more commonly known as Obamacare, which required drug treatment to be paid for by and through Medicaid for poor people and for people who can afford their own insurance by private insurance companies. The drug treatment industry, however, is a whole other topic. Back to prisoner reentry assistance. With or without having incorporated Project HEURISTIC, I did the work. I spent countless amounts of time and energy with men and women and their families and loved ones who have needed help, searching for resources and information for housing, food, clothing, basic hygiene necessities, getting identification, employment, transportation, mental health, etc. How to navigate the systems and the bureaucracies that possessed any resources. Driving men and women to appointments and jobs. Collecting and distributing necessities. And attempting to guide these men and women and their families and loved ones through the difficult feelings and emotions when there was no resources or when access to them was unattainable. And to cope with the reality of being in this environment of freedom versus the environment of incarceration. And I did it without any pay or conditions. And often while I myself desperately needed help. I have been doing what I can to assist at-risk men and women to find a sense of hope and to inspire them to do better and be better for themselves, for their community, for their families. I've been doing what I can to assist families and loved ones who often do not adequately know and understand what to actually do for their loved one who was incarcerated or formerly or court involved. I have been doing what I can to prevent recidivism. I have been doing what I can to protect innocent people and the community. But the mission of Project HEURISTIC has been an extremely difficult and heavy lift for me. I have known mostly only the realistic and practical needs of the men and women, as well as their families and loved ones, but did not know enough about how to sufficiently grow a nonprofit business or to navigate the politics that are implicit in fundraising from government and even private entities, which is necessary to tap into for the resources or to create the resources that are desperately needed by the men and women and their families and loved ones that I have been concerned with. Ultimately, I was not successful at building the business of Project HEURISTIC and have only done as much of the work as I can under the circumstances. And sadly, I humbly and honestly tell you that it has not been even close to enough. This is why I say there is truly much more to be desired of the adequacy, effectiveness, and meaningfulness of my work in this effort. I have needed and continue to need help. Now, whenever I have spoken privately or publicly about Project HEURISTIC and what I do and have tried to do, I consistently get one particular sort of question. What made you get into this kind of work? I've never heard of anything like this in this area. You see, I'm going to digress for a moment. Ocean County is a largely suburban and rural area, situated along the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, and not particularly known for having high rates of crime or having any interest in creative and empathetic methods of dealing with crime and recidivism. But interestingly, as more and more of the children of its more affluent citizens began to be afflicted with the problem of opioid addiction and die from overdoses, there has been an ever-increasing empathy for drug addiction and an interest in creating methods of assisting those who struggle with addiction and the criminal behaviors that accompany it. There is interesting conversations to be had about why that same energy for empathy and creativity didn't exist long before. Like back when there was widespread addiction to crack. But that is also a whole other topic. The answer to the question of what made me get involved in prisoner reentry services, to be fully appreciable, is not necessarily a simple answer. But it does begin with the simple fact that I have been motivated by the realization of how the resources and information for prisoner reentry assistance could have avoided repeated instances of recidivism, victims, an unbelievable expenditure of taxpayer dollars for the arrest, prosecution, and many, many, many years of incarceration of one person in particular, who I have known all his life, but also many other men and women who could have and would have benefited from adequate, effective, and meaningful reentry assistance. The backstory of this one person in particular, I believe, is one of perhaps many perfect examples that there are for the need of the kind of assistance that Project Heuristic endeavors to provide. And I'm going to tell you a bit of his story. In many ways, his story is the sort that is often decried and dismissed as just another sort of sob story of someone with a troubled childhood. That many people have troubled childhoods and don't resort to crime and being a criminal and go on to be successful. How it doesn't justify his criminal behavior. That he should just be responsible. That he should just get a job. If that is your default reaction, and you are unable or unwilling to at least reevaluate it, not even saying to ultimately change it, but to really consider additional information and another perspective and reevaluate it, you may not want to hear the rest of what I'm going to say. But I will assure you now that telling his story is in no way whatsoever even an attempt to justify any of his criminality. Instead, telling his story is simply to give greater perspective and context to small snapshots of his life and to help understand the taxpayer-funded systemic problems that contributed to the creation of those snapshots in his life, and how the failure and refusal to have prisoner reentry assistance contributed to the perpetuation of not just another snapshot of his life, but the creation of another victim of his recidivism. By understanding his story, we can grow to understand that the failure and refusal to have prisoner reentry services left and still leaves innocent people and communities vulnerable and susceptible to avoidable recidivism by him and other similarly situated men and women who desperately want to live law-abiding lives and be productive members of the community, but frankly may not have even a realistic basis to even imagine being able to ever achieve that. And so he and they resort to their own devices and sometimes succeed and oftentimes fail. They know all too often and all too well that many people, for a variety of reasons, will only perceive and treat them as an ex-con, and that their felonies are forever. So telling his story is not at all about making excuses or justification. But instead about the need for us to understand and try to do better. Now his story kind of begins even before he was born.